Check 2.
Test 7. Oh. Check.
And now, I don't know any place that I have found these kind of pipes with this kind of writing ability and musicianship to play along with it in one package. I hope you enjoy as much as we do. This is Beth Macintosh.
This next song I'm going to sing for you is called Whiskey on the Rooftop, and it's a ballad about my grandfather. It's a true story, and it's kind of a neat song for me because my grandfather died on Father's Day of 1990, and on Father's Day of 1991, this song popped into my head, and I wrote it down quickly, and it ended up on the new album, Grizzlies Walking Upright. So this is from my grandfather. His name was Alan Henderson Macintosh. Father's Day last year, I ran along the rocky shore, and the spirit of my father's father left its home of 93 years. Well, I had gone to see him just before. I told him of my songs. He heard me when I told him you can go toward those voices calling you. Tweed hat, plaid pants, a wooden cane, photograph of hickory lane, and I am proud to carry his name. I met him when he was 65. His mom and dad were still alive. He took me for walks in the woods. He was kind of famous in our neighborhood. I went to see him in '85. There was a secret he always kept. He told me that he liked my boyfriend, and he didn't tell anyone where we slept. Tweed hat, plaid pants, a wooden cane, photograph of hickory lane, and I am proud to carry his name. And on my wedding day, we drank whiskey on the rooftop, listened to the bagpipes play. He kissed me and he said I looked like his own bride. Tears came to his eyes, and I held his hand. When he was 92, he volunteered at the old folks' home, listening to rich and varied stories while he was living his own. There is a giant tree. It was planted when he was born. He took me there so I could see the power of time and a loving sea. Tweed is me.
One of the fun things about having Folk Shop Productions now for this our 5th season, we kind of add something new, do something a little bit different all the time, and this is really our first chance to kind of sit and talk to our artists with a camera watching about who they are and that sort of thing. What I think our listeners would really like to know about Beth Macintosh is you weren't always Beth Macintosh that we hear and see now. Where did that happen? Where did that career change happen?
Boy, it's been a long process, I think, from the Beth Macintosh that started in Boston, Massachusetts, which is where I was born and raised, to the Beth Macintosh that sings a lot about Western landscape and a sense of place in the West. I think that basically I started playing guitar at a very young age. In fact, I remember being too small to get my hands around the outside, so I played it from the front while my mother held it. And the first people I ever listened to were old Woody Guthrie records and old jazz records. And so I sort of got
quite a combination.
It's a combination. Both my parents played guitar, so I got both of their sides of what a good piece of guitar music was. And then from there, it was sort of a migration westward, and I went back to school to study jazz guitar finally at Berklee College of Music in Boston, but that was long after I had already become a professional songwriter. So that's kind of the trajectory of the type of influences I had as a young person.
When, music-wise, when did you make that decision? How many years have you really been pushing just music as the big thing for you?
Well, I was in radio for a while, for about 5 years, and in 1988 I stopped working as a radio person. I was sort of doing both for a while there, and in 1988 I just took off. I made the big leap into simply doing original music for a living.
That original music doesn't just fall out of the sky. I mean, you've got to be places and take moments with you and express those back. You've chosen Western kind of themes a lot, right?
Yeah, I have chosen Western themes, although I was just back east doing a promotional concert tour for the new album, which is entitled Grizzlies Walking Upright, and it's sort of a Western title to it. And I found that it was very applicable in the urban centers of the East, too. So I think, though the topics may seem Western, the message is really applicable, and it strikes certain people in almost every situation.
Give me an example of some particular song and what went into the making of that particular song.
Well, for example, the title track, Grizzlies Walking Upright, that's a fun song to talk about because it's one of my favorites. And the title comes from a legend that struck me while I was reading a wonderful book called Native American Myths and Legends. And this particular legend comes from the Modoc tribe, and they inhabited Northern California. And in the legend, a grizzly bear marries a volcano goddess, and their children are the soul of mankind. And this creation myth fascinated me. So the whole album kind of came from that. And there are so many applications of the idea that spiritually we descend from the landscape and from the animals that inhabit the landscape. And like I said, I think that's applicable throughout all situations, not just necessarily in the West or in the rural areas of the West, where you might find a real grizzly bear. So that's where that particular song comes from.
Is there anything specifically Beth Macintosh unique style that isn't encompassed in that kind of an experience there that you could add to that with, that would help people know you know, what you're about, what your, sort of your theme is, I guess, if you have one?
You mean like what? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know how to answer that question.
I'm wondering about the songs themselves and how they relate to you inside. I mean, these are interesting songs, and those themes that you're talking about, there's been some research, you've learned some stuff from folks, but you're singing them because they're important to you.
Yes, I am. That's right. I think that's very true. It is important to me, and I think as a person who is 13 generations from New England, and before that from Scotland, my ancestry is very much a Northern European ancestry. It's very important to me, personally, to connect with what's going on this continent in a very spiritual and also a visceral way. I've been reading a book by Robert Pirsig lately, who wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and now he's come up with another book called Lila, and he talks a lot about the combination of cultures, the Native American culture with the Northern European culture. And, you know, again, personally, I feel that the way that has evolved over the century, 2 centuries, has been in a lot of ways very negative, that kind of cultural mix. And in my own life, it's very important to me to try to establish, sort of reconnect with some of those original combinations of culture and to reevaluate what we have done here on this continent. So that's very important to me.
Your first album, Fire and Sage, and then the second one is Grizzlies Walking Upright, was just fresh out.
Yes.
What is the difference between those two? They're not quite the same.
No, they're not quite the same. Fire and Sage is a little more broad, perhaps. It's, for example, I didn't name the album until it was finished. Grizzlies Walking Upright came from this impulse and this legend, and it was sort of a specific idea. Fire and Sage might be a little broader, and there's material, I think, evolved over a longer period of time. It could be slightly more personal of an album, Fire and Sage. I'm not sure. It's hard for me to evaluate that, but it's definitely an album that speaks to perhaps a broader set of influences for me.
What do you want to do next? I mean, you've got 2 really nice albums. Where do you want to go from here? What's the dream right now?
The dream right now for me is to continue to sort of, in my own experience, look at what's happening cross-culturally in many places in the world, and look at what kinds of, how people have used the landscape and land stewardship as a way of evaluating and developing their own personal and cultural ways of acting in the world. I guess one of the big things about me living out in the beautiful wide open spaces is realizing that we are of the landscape, not the other way around. And so now I want to go to Australia, and I want to look at a concept that the Aborigine people of Australia have utilized in their stewardship of the landscape, which implies a singing of a song while they walk a particular pattern over the landscape. And that defines who they are as people. It also defines how they steward the land and how that relationship exists. So that's kind of my new direction, and I hope that takes a manifestation in an album form. I don't know whether it will yet or not, but
I have a feeling it will, because I think one of the things that you're very good at is capturing a feeling of being there and then taking it with you. And it's like you don't have a camera, but you always kind of picture it in the back of your mind. And your ability to kind of relate that to the people who go to your concerts, I think, is really a special gift that you have.
Well, thanks. I hope so.
I think what would be the best thing to do right now is to take a little minute and sing some of those songs.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. Should we do that?
Sure.
Okay.
Through many windows in the soul, you'll see aboriginality. This place was being built for centuries to house the child of the goddess and the grizzly. To find find you is to reclaim destiny. We must travel between worlds. Without you there is great loneliness. Nowhere to live, nowhere for spirit to breathe. Grizzlies walking upright. So grizzlies walking upright. A primitive mirror eyes reflect what's been lost. Pick on someone your own size without fear and envy, hatred, violence. Rotting trophy flesh, mistaken planet, death on your hands. Grizzlies walking upright. Grizzlies walking upright. Through a small underroots, you'll see magnificent giants sleeping. Future and renewal in the dream. Great bear, little bear, starlight guide me. Grizzlies walking upright. So grizzlies walking upright. They're walking, grizzlies walking upright. Grizzlies walking upright. Three women come to Wyoming. One lives her life in the middle of town. One sees her days out far over the mountain, and one lets her family down. And now these three women have one thing in common. They all hold the key to life in their hands. One wears a hat and the other wears a diamond, and one plants her feet in this land. One plants her feet in the high desert sand. And they watch, and they watch, and they watch from the corners of the valley. And they watch, and they watch, they're watching you now. These three women come to Wyoming, and you can see Wyoming through their eyes. And there's a photograph, and you can see them laughing. You can see how they felt when they came to Wyoming, and you can see Wyoming through their eyes as they watch, and they watch, and they watch from the photograph, and they watch, and they watch, they're watching you now. These three women come to Wyoming looking for the time of their lives. And now these three women come to Wyoming a long, long time ago now. And the edges of the photograph are yellow and ragged, and one of them now lies in the ground. One of them now, she lies in the ground. And there's a photograph, and you can see them laughing. You can see how they felt when they came to Wyoming, and you can see Wyoming through their eyes as they watch, and they watch, and they watch from their places in history, and they watch, and they watch. They're watching you now, these three women come to Wyoming. You can see Wyoming through their eyes.
Well, you do a good show, and I think there's something about, we talked on the way over here to do this recording, that we talked about how this particular area is kind of interesting to you, and you've been here 3 times, 2 times now to do a concert, and what's special about this area? What's it feel like to you?
I don't know what it is exactly, but I just know how I feel when I come into this valley. It's a very powerful feeling for me. And as I was saying earlier, Wallace Stegner describes places in terms of this kind of intuitive feeling that you get when you arrive. And I just know that I have a very strong sense of place here. I think that the landscape speaks. Obviously, it's beautiful to look at, but it's more than just that. I mean, it's the feeling, the people, and the way that people interact with the landscape. It's a very special place, and I'm very delighted to be here.
I think we found, this is our 5th concert season. We've probably done 40-some concerts now, and we found that our concert audience here is very hungry for good music and appreciative of the opportunity here. And I think having sampled other concerts on the peripheries of our valley, I find that our audience response is different in some ways than artists find in other communities.
It is different, and you wonder in a way if maybe the fact is that people here have a high appreciation for that intangible thing called beauty, artistic beauty, beauty in the landscape, whatever they consider to be beauty. Maybe there's a way to get in touch with beauty in a place like this. And so therefore the people are just very warm and open and beautiful themselves, and so that makes it very pleasurable for a performer.
Whatever it is, it certainly makes it possible for us to keep bringing in artists like yourself and sharing that experience, our experience here with you and your experience with us, and it's a lot of fun.
It's great.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
This is a song I wrote in 1979. Ready for this? 1, 2, 3, 4. Work the land till it's green. How many harvests you've seen? Work your hands to the bone. Work. Your life is your own. Morning dawn bird rides down for long is overall jean. Read the sky written by the wind. Look at what he's seen. Oh, you're now singing. Work your land till it's green. How many harvests you've seen? Work your hands to the bone. So work. Your life is your own. Watching years roll by. 40, 50, 60, 75.
work your hands to the bone. Work, your life is your own.
Called A Guest in This Land, and I like this song because, well, it came to me while I was working with some Shoshone and Arapaho children on the Wind River Indian Reservation in Riverton, Wyoming. I was brought into the school to sort of teach these children music, and what I found when I got there was not only did they have music, but it was a sacred and beautiful form of ancient music. So I learned their songs instead, and this is what came out of that experience. It's A Guest in This Land. Feel the power of the sacred land. Mighty tower surrounding sky and sand. A people with less to carry found this beauty. Beautiful people with less to demand. Arapaho, Shoshone, Cheyenne, Blackfeet, Anasazi, using their names like we admire them. Chief Joseph, City Bull, Seattle, Washakie, Shadow and Shade, no one will hire them.